All right, everybody, we're back on the podcast. Me and my buddy Richard, we're talking about recovery topics and just being vulnerable about some things that are going on in our inside of our lives. And I just wanted to have an audience join because I think everybody will find this really beneficial to alcoholics talking about recovery, in this journey and in this process. And yeah, so welcome everybody. What's up, Richard, brother?
What's up?
We already had started some pretty good conversation, but man, I was really relating to the depression thing because we're back in cold season right now, and cold season, your activity limits. There's snow everywhere. It's super cold. Um, there's something about the season that just automatically triggers kind of a withdrawal sort of scenario inside of me. And, I noticed that those things started to happen. And, before I didn't give much thought to those kind of things. I just was kind of like a victim to my triggers. Like it would get cold and I'd want to withdraw and I would want to be alone and stuff. And I wouldn't really know why, I was depressed or what I was going through. But um, now it seems like a more awareness to some things that are going on where now I
Yeah.
see, okay, it's the season. There's some triggers hitting me. There's, and it makes me look at it a little bit different, especially talking about acceptance that you were talking about, that being okay with certain things that are taking place that are, I can't control the weather, right?
Right,
I
right.
could, we talked about a lot of Stoicism last week, which I've been really, really loving, but I can't really control the weather, but I can control my response to the weather. And that's just,
It's really depressing. It gets dark at 4:45, and
right,
here we are sitting in the dark. It's I think a lot of it does have to do with the seasons. As we run through like seasons in our lives, there's always a time for sowing and reaping, and the winter time is just kind of a reminder to me that the death of because everything's dying in the fall, and then in the winter there's just stillness,
right, right.
prior to the rebirth in the spring. So um it's just one of those things. I used to allow the weather to really mess with my moods a lot. Rainy days, cloudy days, that kind of thing. It getting dark earlier. um but in all reality, like, I really, it took a lot for me to understand that and see it for what it was, and
Right.
then fight against that.
Right,
That
right,
I'm not going to allow a rainy day. I can enjoy a rainy day as much as I can a sunny day.
right, right,
It's all mindset.
right. There's something about it's probably come from some book that I've read before, but not being able to control the weather, but we can control our weather. And it was probably like Seven Habits of Highly Effective People or something. But there's a lot of truth to that. There's so many things that happen to us, which we talked about last week, that um, man, I can't control. Like I can't control. Man, this pissed me off this morning. I'll tell you. Talk about things you can't control. So I'm recording my my YouTube video that I try to do every day, and everything in the that can possibly go wrong is going wrong. The dog is barking. The dryer's going. Kids don't have school on Wednesday because of COVID, and they're going in the restroom, slamming the door, flushing the toilet, and I'm just sitting here like doing my video, and my blood is like going through the roof, right? And then I'm like, I'm thinking into this, and as I'm talking, I'm having trouble keeping the topic, and I'm just feeling like this is not happening today. And then my mic breaks right in the middle of me talking. So I'm still trying to talk and I'm fixing my lapel mic. The screw fell out and there's no way to connect it. And I'm like, there's something telling me today this is not happening. And no matter how hard I try, um, I'm just making myself really frustrated because I want this desired expectation of finishing this video. And it's not happening. And then it's kind of like, the way God speaks, it's like, well, how is this manifesting in other areas of your life? Where it's like things are happening and it's just like frustrating, just trying to make things happen, like I talked about last week. And, it just doesn't seem to fall in place a lot of times, where there's some things that just, it's almost like God opens the pearly gates and you walk through and there's music, right? And everything
Right.
just flows and you're in this wonderful state, right?
So that's like that. That's the duality. That's the dance.
Oh, it's craziness, brother.
uh, yeah, I get it. I get it. It's
So,
it's mindset driven. A lot of it. I can equivalate like the flow, playing music, fighting, the things that we do that put, like, there's no emphasis on the outcome. Like when we play music, we're not playing music to hurry up and get to the end of the song. Like, so
right.
there's no implied ending or outcome, and it's just enjoying that moment of playing in that moment, like being extremely present. And I've only been able to achieve that in all areas of my life, in small bursts, it seems like. But that seems to be the key to living a holistic life, is to be able to flow in all areas of our life without that attachment to outcome, the attachment to identity, uh, the attachment to our what our vision is, what it should look like, you know. Because what I found is most of those unrealistic expectations um, set me up for that depression, to hit me
Mhm.
with the depression of not achieving it. But then it also comes from me not accepting the fact that I have no control over the external, you know, outcome. It's all internal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I really love this conversation because it's just where I'm at. It's where I'm currently at in my spiritual journey. When I think about this attachment, I think of like crazy glue and crazy people that wax their hair. And, I kind of think of that in that way is, we attach ourselves to these detrimental things and they stick to us. And of course, when they rip, because we were literally so attached to these things, and so when it rips, it's a pain like nobody's business. And I've experienced that multiple different times throughout my life. With jobs, with positions, with being a pastor inside of an organization, even inside of a marriage, right? Um, that's one thing we're actually told by God to attach ourselves to, right? Become one. And experiencing the ripping of these attachments that really defined who I was, extremely painful. Um, but on the other side, very educational.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yep, definitely. It's like how much, how much suffering are we going to allow? And we have the capability of choosing our suffering. And it kind of boils down, or kind of goes back to some of the Stoic practices, um, of thinking of the things that would most impact you, in the most negative ways, and then becoming okay with those things, if they were to be or not to be.
Yeah.
Because life is pain, life is suffering, and every day it's going to be that. So we have that opportunity, the God-given domain, to choose our suffering. Like, it's going to be painful, but what do we want to suffer for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and just, I guess, understanding that concept um, allows me to really understand where my focus goes, my energy flows. So I, for one, am a man who can't sit on the pity pot. I
Hmm.
self-loathing is death to me, and owning my own life means that I have to own all of it. You know, and kind of
Right.
like what we were talking about earlier, owning the fact that I probably do the things in my life at 10% capacity, and being able to own that, take a honest self-assessment and go, okay, I have to accept where I'm at right now in order to ever gain ground.
Right.
And then kind of taking a look at the things that I'm striving for, and looking at what fears are driving those, because 9 times out of 10 I'm fear driven. In
Right. Right.
some sort of way, and my self-delusional thoughts will convince me that I'm doing this because, and then whatever justification I can come up with.
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
I get that. Um, there was a time where God really spoke to me in a powerful way through a situation, but I'm constantly deleting stuff on my phone to make room for storage, and so I delete my maps a lot. It tells me where I'm located and different stuff. So I'm lost. I'm like totally lost, and so I put the maps in and I put the address where I'm going, and there I have bad internet reception throughout, so it couldn't even find my location, right? And so I had to like scramble to find out really where I was located, to get to my destination. But after I meditated on that at night, um, it was just a strong reality came to me, to just really look at where you're at. We're always constantly trying to get to our location, right? But in that moment, I couldn't move anywhere if I didn't acknowledge where I was. I couldn't really discover and accept where I was at the moment. And I find that a little bit what you're talking about here. But you reminded me of a thought about this suffering that, you know, we talked about last week. I wanted to be the water off the duck's back. I wanted to be that kind of person that is not easily disturbed. Um, I didn't want to be like the disciples in the boat with Jesus, where they're freaking out and they're creating all these scenarios about the end of the world and how they are going to die. And that's pretty much what everybody's, half the population in the United States is doing today, as far as fear, that fear thing that you're talking about, the fear nature. Um, but um, I was listening to something recently, and it was talking about suffering twice. And the suffering twice is fearing the thing in the future that might come upon you.
right.
And so you're suffering in that moment. And then, of course, you possibly might suffer in the future. And so you bring it, project it into the now. So now you're suffering, and then when it comes, you're going to be suffering also because of you allowed the fear. But there's a good possibility that what you fear is not even going to happen. So either way, you're suffering. And I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
Lord, 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 you know what I mean? Because that's this nature that we're talking about. When people say, "Man, this we're sinners and we're evil and all this stuff," but when it comes down to, it's just this fear-based insecure nature
Yep.
that that is driven by fear and insecurities. Exactly, what you're talking about. It's just amazing,
Well,
amazing stuff.
life in itself is suffering. So if we can accept that fact, then when negative things or bad things happen in our lives, they don't have to become hell. It doesn't have to become completely tragic. Like there's a difference between, some tragedy happening in our lives and then us allowing it to become hell.
Hmm.
And it's all within our realm, and I think that's something that you had really hit the point on this week's lesson was, that ultimately we're responsible
Right,
to,
right.
you know to have that understanding, you know um which in itself is empowering, but it's also like very tough to swallow, because now you have to accept that, everything that has happened up into this point, we're no longer victims. Like, it literally takes away all the victimology of our lives,
Right, right.
and then we have to stand here naked and own all of it, which
Yeah.
is in itself so freeing. Like, the acceptance of a negative, um like you have a negative experience, and accepting the negative experience is in itself a positive experience.
Hmm.
So not being able to accept a negative experience is in itself a negative experience. It causes, it's weird, but it's like the backwards law. You know, the things that we're chasing are usually the things that we're lacking, and having an understanding of that, and then being able to take an honest assessment and find out what fear is driving this, and do your best to remove the self-delusion. And a lot of that is through brothers,
Yeah, yeah.
running these things by brothers, and people who hold you accountable and things like that. And
Hmm.
because they can definitely look at it from another perspective, and a lot of the times the answer to our problem is just another perspective.
Yeah.
you know
That's I know that it has been, I've seen it thoroughly in my life, how my judgments produce my suffering. When I was young with my mother, it was, she was an addict. She didn't love me. She didn't love me enough to keep me. The government stepped in, took us all away. Um, and it communicated, from a child's perspective, that I wasn't loved. She didn't love me. And that happened a long time ago, but I carried the same mindset and the modality pretty much to multiple different areas of my life. And that is, I'm going to go ahead and assume people's motives. I'm going to go ahead and interpret this by how it made me feel instead of basing it upon facts and wisdom. And I'm I would like to say that that I'm getting better, and I am getting better. Um, but it's a reoccurring challenge, and I think it is a major challenge with men just in general to go into that judgmental mode and assumptions, and all of a sudden we create our own suffering by the inner dialogue in the stuff that we're doing. Um, we're definitely causing our own suffering. Does that make sense? You kind of relate. Can you relate to what I'm
oh
talking
yeah,
about there?
yeah. It's like they're like self-fulfilled prophecies or projections of, like, I find myself walking around when I'm not doing the work to maintain my spirituality, and
Yeah.
I definitely walk around projecting and like needing external, uh whether it's just something external, like somebody to vent on, or whatever it is. And usually that's when when that's going on.
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah.
definitely when that's going on. And so my growth in that area has been my ability to self-soothe in that, and understand that my feelings are just a symptom of the inner man. So if I feel some kind of way, or my heart desires something, I have to really pay attention to if my mind and my heart are in line.
Hmm.
um, and if I am being driven by fear, what fear is it? Or if I'm being driven by a hope, is my hope in the right place? um,
Hmm. That's important too.
Hope, I think hope for me has been a huge lesson, because it's been probably one of the most uh, deceitful things that I've I've had in my life, like to have hope, and to put my hope in the wrong things can be very, very detrimental in the long run, for like letdowns and
Oh
unmet
yeah. Hmm.
expectations. And I hear that, sorry, I hear that a lot with people, especially um, recovering drug addicts and alcoholics, is that we lose hope, and or I've hoped for this, I've hoped for that for so long.
Hmm.
And once I found that if I put hope in my abilities, if I put hope in me, and I put hope in God's plan and God's love, and not like the outcome, or if
Hmm.
this happens, this will happen, or God, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, or I hope I get recognized for that, or whatever the hope is. If the hope isn't within me, or my ability to just overcome anything, or my ability to be able to be sharpened, or my ability to allow myself to fail. I have a train going by.
Oh, it's okay.
um, Once I started to understand how hope actually worked in that aspect, hope stopped being detrimental to me. Like,
Right, right.
it stopped putting me in situations where I was giving up on myself,
Hmm.
trying to hope a situation into reality. You
Right.
know, like falling out of my frame in order to chase something that I wanted to happen, but it wasn't in God's will. Like you said
Right.
today, it wasn't in God's will for you to make that video.
Yeah.
And sometimes hope hope can destroy us in that pursuit of making that video. You
Oh yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. I have an
and then
agenda. I have a plan, right?
yeah, and then before you know it, like, you're upset, and then that starts that cycle, that crazy thought cycle, that now I'm upset, now I'm upset that I'm upset, now I'm upset at myself for being upset, and and then it just
Uh,
goes into that. And yeah, so really it's like finding out these traps that we set ourselves up for. Like,
right.
we set our own traps. And
We
like,
do.
one thing is for sure, I've come to understand that every time I solve a problem, I'm just creating the next one.
uh,
So it's
it's
like,
good
do I
stuff.
want to deal with better problems or harder problems?
Right, right. uh, as you're talking, I was reminded of a Bible story we hear in Sunday school a lot, but the three Hebrew children, and they were supposed to bow at the image when they play the music, and they were to bow down, and there was something that they said there, and it's exactly what we're talking about here. And he said, they said the God that they serve was able to deliver them, and even if he wasn't, uh, they weren't going to bow. And so they were saying, I trust in God's ability, and He has the ability to do this. But even if He doesn't, and I find that faith missing. I know I was missing it for a long time, and that is we get so attached to the outcome. Like the outcome was, God delivering them. Um, then of course, even if they didn't get the outcome, they were still going to stand upon what they believed. And that is the strong, powerful faith. There's so many times I put expectations upon God, um, for a certain job, for a certain amount of money. Um, I remember a couple years ago visualizing, um, how much money that I wanted to make, and then going into petition and actually expecting God to like be my little genie and give me what I want. And it's like we do these crazy things, but they're all attached to expectations and outcomes, and it does very very much turn God into this sort of genie that is at our command. But I have found that the life is not that way. And the expectations and the hope that you talked about, they could be very dangerous. Now I know that God's going to take care of me and God's going to provide for me, but I have it in my mind how He's going to do it.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, God, you're going
And
to
if it
do it
don't look
this
that
way,
way, it's not
right?
going to happen. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, crazy. We need to even manage our expectations, that we have with God. Um, I'm finding that to be true. And, once we understand His part and understand our part, I think some of those expectations begin to dwindle down, and we stop, asking Him to do what, what is our part, what we're required to do. I believe, He's there to give us the talent, skills, and resources to do something like empowerment. Um, but a lot of stuff, the Christian world is so sick today, and I feel so sad. And they're really, really waiting on God to do what He's waiting on them to do.
Right. Yeah. That was kind of the kick in the teeth, is that it's our responsibility. Like, you, if I'm not willing to take the action, then I can ask all day. I can stay locked in a closet all day, and God's not going to shove a hot dog through the keyhole to feed me. I'm going to have to take some kind of action to get out of that closet. So, understanding that, and I think that actually is more than just a quick thought. Like that is something to ponder, because we ask, like, it's like asking our Father or asking someone for help, but then being completely unwilling to take a look at where you're not owning any, these decisions. It's
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I can't afford to sit on a pity pot. Like, all that does is, creates more self-loathing inside of myself, which then justifies all the, me being a victim.
Mhm.
And then it just perpetuates on itself, and then I just continue to cling on to more and more darkness, more and more darkness, which then in itself creates way more mental illness, because
Mhm.
I find myself becoming very unstable. And whenever I've been in those dark moments, very, mentally unstable, emotionally unstable, physically unstable. So, it's very important to kind of stay on top of what I'm owning, and
Mhm.
own it, and literally um, accept it. Accept that, sometimes I am only doing 10%,
Yeah.
you know, but understanding that at least I am still, because just accepting the fact that I'm at 10% opens up the fact that I'm still fighting the war.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Right.
and that in itself, it's like taking that negative experience and having a positive experience from accepting the negative experience, with it. Uh, that's been, pretty eye-opening for me, especially dealing with depression, unmet expectations, um, kind of jumping off cliffs and having faith. I've heard it talked about so many times, and I've talked about it so many times, and I've experienced it so much more over the last 2 years of just making a decision and not looking back, and knowing that, okay, I'm either going to grow wings or I'm going to splat. Like, this is it, and just allowing myself to do those things, which the only reason I wasn't ever doing that was because of fear,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. Like, that stuff is definitely not easy, especially once you make the decision and like 3 days later you're like, was am I really ready for this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then that self-doubt, and it really depends on what we feed ourselves and what we allow ourselves to accept and not accept. Like, to cast off the darkness, we have to put on the armor of light. So
Yep.
it's like casting off something, we also have to put on something.
Mm. That we could talk about an hour on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's we've been so good on putting stuff off and not so good at putting stuff on, and we just focus on all the things we want to rid from our life to our own detriment.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that would be, like when I in the reality, or in like the 3D world, when I am feeling down and depressed, the quickest way for me to get out of that is to go be supportive to someone, go
Mm.
listen to someone's story, go hear
Yeah.
someone's issues. When I'm feeling very high and mighty, the best thing for me to do is to go, like the opposite. It would be the opposite. uh to understand, go be of service.
Yeah.
It's But those things, to me, like, that's how we fight the war in the 3D, also within ourselves, because being aware sometimes has its disadvantage, that I don't have that excuse anymore, that really.
Ignorance was bliss, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It really was. So, like, having that concept that I can't do this, and when
Yeah.
I'm down and depressed, I know there's one way out, and I can't rely on you. I can't rely on anyone around me to pull me out of that, but myself. And the only way
Right.
that happens is by shifting my perspective, and that's usually when I'm high and mighty, humbling myself. When
Mm.
I'm low and down, it's humbling myself. It's always been kind of found in that humility of, it really isn't about me,
Right. Yeah,
and
that's
when I
good.
can when I can do that, uh that opens the door to acceptance,
Mm.
because
That's
it
good.
might not be the way I think it should look, but it's working. I've made it this far. I'm still breathing. People around me are
Right.
still breathing. So we're
Right.
doing something right.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's good stuff. So I can't, get my thought off something, and it's a reality that came to me probably within the last 2 weeks, and I'm not quite sure how it came, but now that you're talking about when we first started the conversation about music and playing a part and not trying to rush through the thing, the reality very recently came to me. Those I do have a part. For a lot of my life, I have bucked against that part. And what came to my mind during that scenario um, was somebody doing a play, and the person was given a part, and then being unsatisfied and happy with the part, and then trying to play the other people's parts. And that's the kind of mindset and the analogy that God gave me with what I was struggling with. That throughout my life, I've been unsatisfied with my part and not really tapping into the talents and the resources and everything that's in front of me. Like, God has put so many things in front of me and said, here's the path, walk in it. And I'm like, got my heels and, in, and I'm like, I want to be blessed this way. Like I want
Right.
financial things to come in this way, not this way. And with this strong acceptance of my part, that, I really, I'd like to think that I picked my role, but I really didn't. The talents that God has given me and everything that it has put upon my heart, I feel is placed there by the divine. And it's time for me to stop kicking against, and frustrating myself and really accepting my role and to begin to, like you're talking about music, and to begin to harmonize, right? Recognition. This is my part. This is what I'm playing. Now let's get in harmony and let's create something beautiful. And uh, that's amazing. Amazing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate you, brother. And thanks for spur of the moment, doing this podcast and
Oh yeah.
really good stuff. I'm definitely re-listen because there's a lot of stuff that I need to write down so I remember going forward some of these things
Yeah,
that
I love our conversations. We definitely um, we don't have just what's up conversations. And it's nice to like be. It's nice to. I'm one who processes thought through like abstract conversation, and so sometimes I go off on some really odd roads, but it kind of does come back. It
yeah.
always resolves. you know, so but I think that's probably one of the best things that we can do. Trying to think outside the box is, being able to allow that freedom of thought through flow of conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate you, brother, and thanks for participating. And